It's Beard Banter episode 49. I'm sitting here with my friend, Jeff Farris. And I'm excited about this one because I think it's going to bring out some good topics. And I'd love to ask you in the chat to put in some comments, help us guide this conversation as we go. But Jeff, what's your topic? What did you want to talk about? And please introduce yourself to everybody, brother.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Matt. It's good to be with you. Good to see you again. We
Likewise,
don't,
always.
we'll talk for an hour today, maybe. I don't know for however long, but we never get
About 40 minutes.
we never get a chance to talk this long actually in person, right?
That is true.
We've always got so many things going, right?
Yeah,
So
that's true.
I'll appreciate just talking with you for a few minutes.
That's awesome, man. I love it.
So I'm Jeff Farris, right? So I'm president and CEO of Cloud Radio, which is basically everything client, right? So we are the missing link typically between partners and their clients. The unified client portal is one way to think about it, but it's also not only the unified client portal for the clients, it's also the unified client portal for the partners. I love these comments.
I know.
Oh,
It's
that's
already
Clayton.
getting great.
Yeah,
It's Clayton. Yeah.
he works for me, so it's like,
Well, it's kind of maybe it's a corked bath. Then you're
yeah,
saying is the
you gotta
point.
say
That's
that. So anyway, but hey, it counts. We count. With brown nosing counts, right? Totally. But yeah, so Cloud Radio is everything client, and really we have, I think, transformed that space or created that category. That's something that's beyond the ticketing portal, right? So it's not just a ticketing portal connected directly to your PSA. It's
right.
It's everything, right? It's the QBR and digital. It's the digital transformation of the client experience from the the MSP.
And you and I've known each other from that world, right? Like that was where we first met when I was actually an MSP client and trying to figure out how do I extend, the ticket system, the ability for them to triage tickets, right? And so that's how we met was that space. But you brought up a topic. And it's in the title, obviously, automation from end user to the MSP. And it is obviously what you do. So those two are correlatable. But the topic that came up, just restate it like we started in the beginning of the show. What was your intention of this topic, that restatement of it, and what we're going to talk about today?
Yeah. So, think about automations. And again, there's a lot of stuff that we're doing as an industry to automate the technician, right?
Sure.
And I do believe things like PIA and Roost and even PowerShell, the things that Microsoft's doing with PowerShell.
Desired state configuration stuff, all those things that
Power
you can
Automate.
do. Yeah.
I mean, we're seeing a lot of tools that basically make the technician, make that service staff a lot more efficient.
Sure.
And I have this core belief that, 5 years time, MSPs will basically employ about half the people at twice the cost.
I agree.
Right.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
We've transitioned from people helping people with their technology to helping people help technology help people. Right.
It's true.
And that's a real fundamental change in this space, which, if you look at the PSAs of today and you look at the way they're structured and the data fields they collect, it was all about time. It was all about labor, right?
Right. It was efficiency. It was RIM, reactive hours per endpoint per month. It's all of those type of things, right? It's about labor management. Yeah. And resource
And
management.
so if you look at what's really changed subtly, and now it's just glaringly obvious, is now it's about intellectual property that MSP has to streamline that experience for everybody, right?
Yeah, 100%.
And so we've seen a massive shift in intellectual property away from labor, but that also means that we've seen a massive shift away from people, right? So away from clients, right? Because again, as you're busy managing your stack and checking your MDR reports, your RMM reports, checking your everything.
We use a lot of letters, right? Like we use a few letters here,
right? And so if you're not an MSP on this broadcast, I mean, why bother, right? Why bother listening?
Sure.
But I do think that at the end of the day, we've gotten the clients out of the MSP, and we have to go back and rethink the MSP from the client side in. Right. As opposed to the MSP out. Right. Because the stack is becoming a little more commoditized. Again, you've seen the security wars over the last few years. There's now been some emerging vendors that have, larger market share that, now become more standardized to a certain extent.
Yep.
Security, again, it's, if you install the basic stack from Pax8 or a variety of other vendors out there, you're probably 90% there and some basic security measures, but then that makes you just like every other MSP, right?
Sure. Well, and I want to rewind on something that you said, right, Jeff? Because this commoditization statement that you made, and there's a commoditization of the tools, there's a commoditization of, even to your point, the tech. And what I mean by that is, like, think back to when we were first putting together a 486 or a, whatever the next iteration that came
Right.
after that,
Yeah, maybe
386.
30
Maybe I'm
years,
showing
right?
myself.
Yeah.
I might be a little older now, huh?
Yeah.
But the point is, we used to have to put IRQ jumpers to say this is IRQ 7 and COM 3, right? Remember that? But now we don't. We buy a machine, and in the same breath, we went from having to start up a machine, get it tied to an AD or get it tied to a local account, set it up and prep it, go do AD join, reboot the machine, get it set up, sign in with the user, all of those things, to now I buy a machine and sign in with Office 365 and I'm set up.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And when you think about that commoditization, and it's very much down the line of Angry Birds. If I fire up Angry Birds right now, I don't think I have Angry Birds on here, but if I did, 100 out of 100 times it fires up. 100 out of 100, it's fine. Same thing when I launch my web browser. 99 out of 100 to go to that site, I'm up. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you start thinking about that impact, ease, the scriptability, the automation, the API centrism, this center on identity, means that the plate spinning stuff we do as MSPs, the things we do to, like, keep stuff functional, reboot server, apply patch, do this, got an error message, most of that stuff goes away.
Oh, it almost all goes away. And even, even think about firewalls. I mean, it's a little more esoteric, but if people are still on-prem using firewalls, right, which is another issue.
Yeah.
But
if you're at Starbucks, you calling them up, hey, I need to put this
right.
firewall in between me and no, you're using an agent on a machine. You're using SASE, SSE edge type methodologies
right.
too,
But
right?
even if there's a firewall,
Yeah.
you can't manage the firewall patches as well as the cloud can.
Oh, true story.
Right. So,
yeah, 100%, right? All of the things.
Right. So again, you're pulling, labor's been pulled out of everything, which makes it all commoditized, because again, it's not necessarily even the skill of the MSP that's involved, because autopilot just works, right?
Yep.
And
my first
it'll
3
get you
clients I
connected.
converted to a modern experience back in 2017 or so fired me, Jeff. You know why they fired me? Matt, you're not adding any value. Stuff just works. I fire it up and I get to ship a laptop, and Janie in South Dakota has a laptop. I don't have these problems.
Well,
what's your value to your head?
I think it's even scarier, because the laptop that MSPs charge $100 to $200 a seat for is costing that user, that company, $60.
Yeah.
And if it breaks, especially some of the low end
help me understand.
Most of them you just throw in the
statement,
trash.
Jeff. I see what you mean. The asset becomes ephemeral also in that model, right? Yeah.
Right.
And so I say all of that to say that makes this commoditization of the MSP extremely high. But it doesn't mean that you as an MSP shouldn't lean into taking advantage of the commoditization and the intellectual property they can build to user experience, to then aid the security experience, to then aid how well I guide and strategically add value. So as we think about what the MSP has to pivot to, the MSP has to pivot away from the commoditization things. They have to lean into doing those, but then they have to move out to that client experience very much, which is kind of the focus of what you're bringing up, which is how do you use your systems and tools to make that commoditization that's there, the tech that I say just works. I'm being very summative. How do you then take and extend that out to that customer? And when you think about security, what do you have there in that regard, right? And so those are kind of the topics that we wanted to kick off with, right?
So, you talked about jumpers, and I remember straightening pins on RAM chip, because it's like, it's not booting. It's like, oh my, I've got a pin sticking outside the socket, right? It's like,
on the CPU socket back then
it's like,
too.
okay, so, good times, right? But now that stuff is not an issue, right? And so that, if you look at that basic PC setup was been commoditized, and we're just working up the stack.
We're going up to layer 7 commoditization, right, at this point.
Yeah, so we have a stack model similar to the the ISO layers, but in our stack, which is kind of a client stack, it starts with efficiency, and then the next level up is security, and then after that it becomes compliance, right? But the efficiency and security stacks now are to the large extent commoditized, and clients don't even really want that stuff anymore. I mean, they don't come to an MSP going like, help me choose the best PC.
It's table stakes, right? They assume that's part of that aspect.
Right. And look, we're going to use Office 365, or we're going to use G Suite.
Sure.
And so our basic systems are set up. Now, in our stack, it goes from efficiency to compliance. which is, a big shift, because now I have to actually engage with the client more to meet their compliance requirements that are coming from cyber insurance, or coming from
Contractual
your auditors,
obligations,
contracts, even like
regulatory obligations, all.
CMMC, right? I mean, it's a huge compliance lift for those MSPs foolish or hardy enough to endeavor to do that. But so you get the compliance phase, and now you're starting really into the intellectual property side of the MSP, right?
Or to scale it, you are.
Well, even
Right?
I think
I think
even
so,
for
Shane.
even on the client, because you can't go into the client with a generic compliance framework without understanding the business that they're in, understanding their people, their onboarding
Yeah,
processes, their
true.
offboarding processes, and all that stuff that you learn from the client is the intellectual property, or should be the actual intellectual property of the MSP. That's knowledge that differentiates him or her from every other MSP, is the knowledge of the client,
Yeah.
right?
And I
So,
see it a little bit differently, but the same from that output. What I mean by that is I see the MSP becoming deeper in the client.
mhm.
And as a result of that, then they are part and parcel of the intellectual property they're in the client. And so I see it a little differently, and where I think some of that IP lays as far as how it functions. Like if I build you a security policy, it's yours to your extent. And if I leave now, however, you've got to replace it with the same looking holes and the same looking things that I'm doing in order to meet that. And so that's where I would agree with you. There's some intellectual property based on what they're learning from the client that then is something that we hold, and we must, so I think we're saying similar things. But
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, if it done right, the client owns the work product of the MSP, except that the MSP really can use that work product to go deeper. And so, if you
Yeah.
get through compliance, again, in our stack, it goes to productivity, or it goes to continuity, productivity, collaboration.
So wait.
And
So hold on, Jeff. So your order of operands is from the base layer efficiency, or is this a linear progression in your mind that
Yeah, and I think I may
security
have
or
misspoken.
productivity?
It's really security, continuity, and then compliance, because you can't have compliance without
Yeah.
continuity, right?
Okay, but the point still being that you're placing those before productivity, right?
Yes,
Am I understanding you correctly?
yes.
I love you right now, Jeff Farris. I can't reach through the camera and kiss you, but I would agree the underpinning of security have to come. And so I haven't heard anybody else place it in that way, in the way they think of it. But I agree. That's if you were to take it as a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if I don't have security, I can have all the productivity in the world, and I'm going to lose it all out the back door. Right.
Yeah.
And so I love that you've placed them in that order. The continuity aspect, I'm assuming you mean extends into COOP, not just continuity of systems, right? I'm assuming in that.
Yeah. So
definition.
can I get to the internet, right? I mean, if
Yeah,
you have an
yeah.
internet outage, you can't do anything, right? You can't be
Sure.
productive, collaborative, or anything if you can't get online, right? Or
I
if you
didn't
get
expect this
online,
to go this direction, but this is a fantastic conversation anyway, at least for me. I'm
well,
enjoying
yeah.
it.
So,
Yeah.
so again, if you look at this stuff but this is also client understandable structure, right?
Sure.
Because when you talk about the typical stack from an MSP standpoint, they may think about their RMM or their layer security or whatever. All of that stuff at the client level, they just don't care. I'm secure.
Sure.
That's all I care about. I don't care what software my tax accountant uses. I don't care if they use a pencil or a calculator or a computer. I don't care. I just want the best return I can get from my tax accountant, right?
Yeah.
That's legal and fileable.
Sure.
And for an MSP, again, these small businesses,
I want to ask
see
for
the
like
MSP the same way.
semi-legal on my taxes if I can. I don't want to like in the grayish legality aspect
Yeah.
from my CPA.
Well,
Anyways, I digress.
Semi gray is legal, right?
Yes.
So may have to
It's
do
fair.
some defense
Touche.
work, but right. But the whole goal is to get, but that's now the table stakes. That's the commoditization
agreed.
stuff. And until you get into the compliance phase, you really are still, you can be doing anything for any client, and you may not even care what they're doing, right? So again, the way you run compliance, security, and efficiency for one small business is going to be very similar to for another small
Agreed.
business.
Yeah.
And this was the bread and butter 5 years ago of an MSP, was to deal with these three basic layers. And that was pretty much their entire job. If you look at most of the way MSAs are written today, they really only deal with those first three layers. Hey, we're going to keep your Windows machine or your Mac machine running. We're going to make sure you're backed up. And
we're going to be efficient at it so we can all be profitable, right? Those are kind of that basic statement there.
Right.
For that.
Right. But there was not necessarily, you didn't sit down with the client to understand their needs. And so again, that was very labor-based, very maybe setup-based. But now we're getting into compliance, productivity, collaboration, and decision-making. And that's that's fully engaged with the client.
So let's take this back to the premise that we talked about, which is looking from the outside in, from the client into the MSP, which is the premise you put forth. And then second to that is, how do we think about that pieces? Let's give some examples of what your thoughts are of automating from the end user to the MSP. And you said it before the show in something like this, where you're like, why do we want a person to put in a ticket, wait, have somebody come back and respond when there are avenues to have it potentially auto respond, which scares the shit out of me, is exactly the path we're taking, right? Like if I go to a website and I have to get to a point where I call someone, I feel like I have massively been let down by that website, right? If I can't go to something, enact the changes I want, find easy help, drive me down. And maybe that's a change in the culture and the way things are going, is that a lot more do it yourself. And I want to have the ability to manage my stuff myself. And so you're seeing this be that extensibility of what clients looking from their experience in. To help me understand that, what we started talking about.
So,
Jeff.
yeah. So simply, if you think about it, there's two terms, or there's two words here that we don't talk near enough about in this space, and that's digital transformation, right? Because we've heard the term a lot.
Buzzword we've just heard go on for forever, or does that really mean something, Jeff?
It really means something. And so you've seen the digital transformation of an MSP stack. There's very few. There's very few MSPs that are hosting Exchange servers on-prem, right?
God bless. I hope so.
Right. There's less and less servers on-prem, right? More of the core business apps are in the cloud, right?
Yep.
So
agreed.
So we've already seen a digital transformation away from even restaurants. Maybe look at what happened in COVID. Restaurants became digital, right? Because they had to do online ordering. They had to do basically arrange drivers, all of that stuff. So restaurants became digital,
and one or two or three main companies that made that super easy for that line of business won that battle, right? Like as you think about that, the people, the Shopify's, the little POS terminals you see in every chocolate shop or restaurant now, those are the ones that won out during that transformation too.
Again, the best digital experience is a real competitive advantage for a small business, right? And so now what happens is we digitally transform the inside of the MSP with a lot of the tools in the stack. We haven't done anything to digitally transform the relationship with the client. So, and to go to your point, digital transformation is basically at its core hooking a user directly to the technology, right? Okay. And so think about Amazon. Amazon connects you not only to their inventory, but to their warehouses and to the drivers, right? I mean, I know my package is 3 stops away, right? I
can see the door open, waiting for them to drive up with the next part I ordered from the studio, right?
Yes, it's like I feel like the kid at Christmas, right?
Yeah,
it's like,
me too.
my new widget's coming here in
3 more stops.
Yeah, he's coming.
And if you don't have that, it's horrible. Think about ordering a cab right now compared to Uber, right? If I go to Uber,
but now
click on Uber, order me 5. Yeah, exactly. Sorry, go ahead.
But this is the standard expectation that we as consumers have. It's also the standard expectation that small businesses have, right?
True story.
So if I need to update my payroll, I don't call somebody. I go to the payroll portal, right? If I need to update my, I need to file taxes online, I go to the state tax portal, right? I don't call somebody unless I really am messed up. I don't call Amazon. I don't call the tax office. I typically don't call anybody because I can do it all online. I register my cars online. I do everything online because, again, everybody's digitally transforming, which is, again, they're connecting me directly to their technology, right? And when it comes to an MSP, as a general rule, as an industry, we need to think about how we connect our users directly to our stack, right? Directly to our technology, right? Because we all know right off the bat, we don't want them in the Microsoft admin portal, right?
Sure.
We know we don't want them in our security portal. We know we don't want them in our backup portal, right?
Right.
And so the way we've gotten around this historically is we print and present,
Well, we have a meat layer, right? Like I said before, it goes ticket, meat layer, response, right, or action. And so you have a human that's that filter in that regard.
And the reporting process is also a meat layer too, right? And this is why, you've heard me say it, and we get some pushback, but kill the QBR, because it's not, you don't want to kill the relationships or the conversations with clients, but you want to spend that time talking to clients, listening to clients, not talking to clients.
Yeah, presenting your value statement is not valuable It's how do you add value during those meetings, right? How do you take in?
Well,
Yeah, yeah,
and again, and the number one thing you can tell if you're in a business review meeting with the office manager, you've already started failing, right? And when you find yourself in that business review meeting with the intern, you
yeah.
really, you really are failing, right? Because now you're talking and not listening, right? If you're
Sure.
asking the right questions, they're going to say, I don't know that question. Let's walk into the CEO's office or the boss's office and get this answer. Now you're talking to the right people and you're getting the right responses. But if you go in there and talk about the AV report or
Yeah,
how you're going to change MFA for the next quarter, they're just not
yeah,
going to care, right?
yeah.
That's not a boss
That's your
conversation.
problem,
That's
right? Yeah, yeah.
right.
Boss is strategic and making sure that we have company direction and things to that nature. To your
Right. That's
point,
a VCIO. The holy
yeah.
grail supposedly is to be a VCIO. And most of the time when MSPs get that chance in front of the boss, they
They
talk
don't be
about
VCIOE. They talk
no,
about
they talk
prices
about
of
their stack.
PCs and
Right.
yeah,
And let me show
stupid
you this
stuff.
report with red on it because it's
Yeah,
scary,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
that's
yeah,
there's a lot of stuff that if you're going to live by, for example, security. And again, you can cut this a couple different ways. I'm not necessarily a big fan of selling on security because if you fix it, go to your point earlier, if you fix security or you make them feel secure, they don't understand why they need you anymore, right?
yeah.
That's a very transitive or it's a
And it
very much
speaks
a
to a
one-time
moment
event.
where we are, right? It speaks to a moment that security hasn't been endemic in everything we do. It hasn't been built into the ways we think. And so now it's the shiny thing. Well, we're going to be the security and we're going to solve it. But ultimately, I do believe my even role in this understanding of pushing security becomes more and more table stakes and more endemic in the way we think of things, in my mind.
It's the
So,
cost of showing up, right? Do you
yeah.
know security? Can you manage the 365 tenant? Yes, yes, good.
Right.
Now let's
Check.
talk about
Sure.
where
Yeah.
right now let's talk about where we want to go. Again, it goes back to your accountant. Do you have the software I'm using to do my accounting? Yes.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
using
Sure.
QuickBooks. We're using QuickBooks. Yes. All right. That's table
Good.
stakes for an
I don't care
accountant,
what
right?
you use. That's your deal. Yeah. Yeah. To your point. Yeah. That use the same thing. But, one of the things that I think, that you talked about is hooking people closer into their stack and their tools and making it easier for them to do it. Self-service, right? To that extent.
Yes.
How does that work in this regard, right? Because a lot of times we're coming as an MSP to ask someone to change something, to get people bought in. But what would you think in your mind? I mean, because one of the things that stands out to me is reporting a security event, right? Those are probably some really good functional things you'd want someone really close to your tools. And we've seen that. We've seen people integrate portals to their ticket system. You and I have
Mhm.
talked about that. But I'm at Roost's SKO, right? I just
Okay.
spoke at the sales kickoff here. Yeah, so that's where I'm at now. I'm South Carolina, but I was at Roost SKO, and I genuinely believe because of the way the world's changing. Think about running an Exchange server versus Office 365 as an MSP. If you're out there listening, think about that delineation. Massive, but it also now comes with this sweet set of graph APIs with. And even though maybe
Mhm.
Microsoft exposes all this stuff in their admin portal, what if I maybe wanted to expose only certain functions, or if I only wanted to expose certain things? Adding that layer in between allows you to cater the experience. And if you can do it in a way that they don't know they're asking for those functions, if you can do that in a way that they're saying this goal, and now you have checks and balances and workflows in place that can take it down that goal. Right. And I think it's interesting to think about the more we can get people used to that self-service exposure, then now we can get people used to using the security features that are self-service as well that need
Well,
to be done.
think about from a very simple perspective. I mean, we've all had situations where there's an employee in the office that needs to be walked out right now for
Okay.
whatever reason, right? Now, if I'm a small business and I walk somebody out the door and I need them cut off right away from their login to 365, think about the process now. I go in, I submit a ticket, right?
Yep.
And, because again, it's lunchtime, nobody's answering the phone, whatever it is, right? But I submit the ticket and then I hope they got it and they act on
Yeah.
it,
And that they're going
right?
to do their parts before noon when I walk Johnny out. And then I'm going to be, this is a great call because I think this is a great use case scenario that I've dealt with. What if instead you give that manager, they're a manager in Office 365, so you can deal with that. Do they have permission? Right? You can validate the user through the Office 365 identity, right? The
You,
M365
you don't even have to
identity.
do that. Again, with the good automation, with the stuff that we'll demonstrate here in a few weeks. And again, you can use Roost and other stuff, but you can also do it with Cloud Radio's future automation
Sure.
tools. which is really cool. But we'll defer that for another conversation.
That's your
But
one, Jeff. That's the
that's
one
my
product
one.
mention you get. I'll
So,
kick you off of the other next one.
but
I'm
what's
teasing.
important is, again, in Cloud Radial, the user goes, look, we need to let this user go.
Yeah.
They put in the email address. It fires off an automation that basically turns off their 365 access,
Yeah.
right? And at that point in time, now the MSP, when they get back from lunch, has a chance to deal with that and fine tune the details of it without causing a major problem, right? Because
Yeah.
again, the user walked them out, they turned off their 365 access. They're not 365 authenticated. They don't need to know how to work the admin portal. They don't need to know anything. They just submitted essentially a ticket, but that automation of submitting that ticket also turned off that
Yeah, yeah. And I
365
think you were just missing my point of that, is that I want to know that Jeff Farris, who is firing Billy, is Jeff Farris. As long as they've been validated and they're in their identity. And to your
Mhm.
point, they don't need to know that. But I do need to know that that's really Jeff asking for Timmy to be fired or let go of, right? And so those are the things that you're helping matriculate and automate, right?
Well,
Is that part. Is taking
you
it from,
you
I need to
you've
let this
got
guy
the
go.
fire,
Yeah.
right? At first, I mean, think about it, you've got the fire and you want to get rid of the fire and then deal with the damage
Yeah.
afterwards. And
Yeah.
maybe,
Totally.
oh, it was your barbecue. Sorry. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But safety called that at least we put out the fire, right?
Yeah.
So again, you want security on the front end. You want the strong authentication. Ideally, you're
Yep.
authenticated by the same way that you authenticate with 365,
Yep.
right?
Slam dunk. I agree.
Right.
Yep.
And so again, when you're in the portal or you're in that experience, you have a good idea who it is. And then you
Yep.
can use things like, and then when you call in later or you submit if you want to do it by phone, if you want to do it by ticket. But the important thing is not only have you triggered the disablement of 365, but now the user can see that user's been disabled. I was talking
Yeah.
to a small business owner the other day, and he said, "Look, we terminated a guy because we think he's gone to work for a competitor. I still don't know whether his access to all of our data has been turned off." Right now, again, you can say that's a bad MSP or
Yeah.
whatever, but at the end of the day, that's a communication issue. He might have gotten the
Yeah.
ticket and reacted to it in 20 seconds. But again, there was no digital transformation of that experience from the MSP
I
to the
love that
client.
thought process on that for
So
the way they
maybe that
experience it.
email related to that turnoff is now lost in his inbox, right?
Sure.
Or it went to spam. So does it, is a job really done if the corresponding ticket is in somebody's spam box?
Well, and you also kind of, we got a couple beard comments that we'll come back to. Greg Plum said, glad I kept my skiing beard on. I'm not sure. Is that just because it's beautiful out and you're like, it's cold and I don't want my face to hurt, so I'm going to grow my beard out for skiing this season.
Yeah, it
Frisian
doesn't do as
said,
well if I stroke
didn't
mine,
shave
so.
my beard for this. So thank you. I appreciate you. That's good. To your point, though, if we are connecting directly in and we're showing that user experience, they've been able to disable their user, they walk them out the front door. You know what else it creates, Jeff? And you talked about this up that Maslow's list of needs there, pretty face. It's also creating the compliance of it. I can actually write a policy that says this is how we disable users. Jackass number 1 turns off jackass number 2. And that's all they can do. We didn't expose the admin. We didn't have to go through a PIM selection to give them PIM rights into this. No, we created a non-meat layer connect disablement of a user. And perhaps before they can re-enable, we have to do it. Perhaps we don't choose to automate that piece of it, right? But to your point, you can cater where those touch points make the most sense, where they provide the most digital transformation from an experience perspective for that end client. And then we can put in the security layers where it doesn't make sense. If I want to create a new user and give them access to everything in the world, maybe that does need a meat layer approval. But even that I can automate, right? Even that I can say, I'll get it into the system in the right way. It'll have the right codification. It'll hit the right paths, and it'll go to the right approver for that can go down that path, right? You can automate that experience. And as you look back on it with compliance, I don't have Johnny actually meet the 7-minute timeline to do the cutoff of the user. Nope. Did automation succeed? Yes or no? If automation systemically failed, then robotic process automation engineer or engineers in general or services as you're providing it, then have to figure that out. And what's interesting about that is that creates defensibility, right? That creates how do you know? Because a fucking system did it. That's how I know, right? And it's systemic. And so I get up on my high horse about this one, but I do genuinely believe the value and efficacy of security and the value and efficacy of the compliance of those things you're required to do go up exponentially as your John Madden answer here of like, you're not winning because you're not scoring enough points. But in reality, the highest form of any process order is automated. And so when you think about it, if you can take that all the way from a known entity wanting to accomplish something and take it through a path of a known path that accomplishes that in the way that's both compliant, efficient, effective, isn't that literally what we're trying to accomplish here? And also what we've already done down our rim parts, right? You talked about us automating internally. We've done that. We've done tons of efficacy and efficiency things internally, but what about taking that externally, right? And anyway,
well, if you think about the process, we're trying to create a zero defect, automation or a manufacturing line, right? So again, what user puts in submits a problem, we solve the problem, zero defects, right?
And we have proof of solving it, right? Is the other aspect.
Yeah, that's part of the process, right? I mean, there needs to be, if you're going to manufacture something, there'd be something sitting in the tray after you manufacture.
That's fair. That's fair. If you're going to make a part, the proof is the part exists and meets all the specs as measured. Yeah, fair, fair.
So as you go through that process, again, think about Amazon, how many things you push through Amazon or similar services.
Right.
And, rarely do you have to invoke a chat or something like, I didn't get this.
About 1 out of 20 or something. It's usually fraud, right? It's usually a fraud aspect or something.
So their defect ratio is really low like that. Now, I suppose you had to call into Amazon to order, right?
Negative. Yeah.
Right. Or email them like, hey,
well, and look at the difference. I'll do my one plug. You got a one plug? I'll do a plug. You look at the difference between a company like Schmingma and Pax 8, and you have one where now I've got to call this desk and I'm going to talk to the one person that's definitely going to sell me that product versus click, add to Johnny. And I think that's your point. That's what John Street and team did so well is they automated and digitized that user experience of software ordering and how we put things on a client.
Case in point, you digitally transformed ahead of your competition, and it gave you a competitive advantage in the marketplace to do that.
Yep.
And again, that works for almost every business, and it works for MSPs.
And it works for SMBs too. Because one of the things we're not talking about yet, Jeff, that comes impact from this is automating the ability to do the things that let them serve their customer in that digital transformation. Those SMBs have customers. You said it well in the retail. Like, I want to know, what did Uber Eats do for thousands of little restaurants? They made it where I'm looking at my phone. I go, oh, I know when my food's going to be here, right? And they sold it, made tons of money for that, right? They're charging the restaurants through the nose for those services and capabilities. But if you think about any small business that has a customer, can make them better at serving their customer too. You've taken that even to that next step of how they then win against their competition with those same tools.
Well, think about if you show up with the old, say the 5-year-old pitch now, which is we're here to help you with your managed.
We'll be the best white glove in the world at making your computers work. And
again, I always think that's I have to have it like I have to have homeowners insurance, right? Or
we'll make your car work and drive, and it will drive out with fenders. We're going to be the best fender. Like, no, nobody fucking cares.
No, I guarantee you, no small business owner started their business so they could buy household, business insurance or to hire an MSP. Never, right? That was never.
Now, they do need both of those things. They do need to head down that path, but they didn't start out with that. They started out with a dream of serving their customer and a dream of serving their family.
If you have to have it, how much money are you going to allocate for it? You're going to allocate as little as possible if you view it as a commodity.
And add value and make me money. Like, you'll spend as much as possible with that new 5-axis machining tool you're going to buy from Makino for $3 million and have but yet when it comes to the other piece, they just don't see the value. And so that's the difference, right? I think.
Now, think about how much you would spend for a lawyer that understands your business when you get into a problem, right? Because a good lawyer is a competitive advantage.
You're not wrong, brother.
Right?
You're not wrong.
And so people, I mean, the bill rates of attorneys are much higher than the bill rates of MSPs for a very specific reason, is a sense that they give that business competitive advantage with a lot of domain expertise about either the problem or about the small business and preferably both, right?
Yeah, 100%.
And so an MSP to move up the stack, and Microsoft's been saying this for a long time, so this isn't like an epiphany. They've been pushing people up the stack for a while. If you think about hiring, or what you want out of technology, you want to have competitive advantage, and you want to be able to and you can do that just even simply by just being able to make better decisions and getting better insights.
Yeah.
Right. So how do I do that as a business, and how does my MSP help me move up, from productivity, collaboration to decision making because an MSP that's in there helping that business make better decisions because they use the technology wisely and they use all of the MSP stack, or they use all of the technology stack to accomplish that, like Power BI and
Oh
all
yeah.
these other cool tools
All
that
the
are out there.
RPA stuff that is coming down to the
Yep.
customer, right? That they're going to automate too. Like so much of that
Yep.
stuff. Yeah,
So,
100%.
or just connecting the application together. I mean, my goodness, we're a small business and we've got probably 20 SaaS apps that we use, but
Sure.
we stitch them all together because we feel by stitching them together, it keeps our employment costs down, right? Because I don't have as much meat in the
Yep.
middle of moving data around from one system to another, right?
Which means predictability goes up, user
It means
experience goes up, failure goes down.
it means my defects go down, right? And if your defects go down and you've automated, that means your labor costs can at least stay the same or not grow as fast.
Or probably what I would predict is, I think it's funny. So I don't know if Tony Miller still catches these or not, but I'm gonna call his name out. So Tony, sorry. But Tony Miller was my boss, VP of operations at Iconic. And I used to tell Tony, I was like, we're heading down a world where all the plate spinning activities like server patches and rebooting and switch challenges and VLAN routing, all those things are shifting into a much more scalable, automated and repeatable thing, right? And that means that there's not going to be as many plate spinners. I think you opened the show with, in the future, MSPs will have half the number of humans at the same labor cost, right? So twice the cost, right?
Right.
So the same cost. But I said that, I said, Tony, you're going to have to shift into things like strategic and being vCISOs and VCIOs and being in their competition with the same tools, like that kind of stuff. And he said, Matt, it's great, but please stop using plate spinners in our organization when you talk internally. I said, why? He goes, because of all the plate spinners, Matt. Fair. Touche. And my argument was, they'll convert, they'll become those humans, they'll grow into that space. And maybe that's true, and maybe I'm lying to myself. But shifting down a path where getting this intellectual property for the automation and how you interact with my systems drives down through the commoditization, the number of humans doing the crappy wrench turning, and drives up the number of people that come in and go, Jeff, tell me how you make money. Help me understand how we're going to be better with your customer, right? I think we're shifting.
So if you want to know that the industry is being commoditized, look at the number of acquisitions, right?
Yeah.
And you can't acquire snowflakes. You can't roll up snowflakes. You can only roll up consistent operations.
God, that's a good argument. That is
Right?
absolutely true. We looked for X template, $3 million MSP or less with these type of slam dunk agree with that. You're gathering the commodities together, right? You're bringing all the standard oils together to be standard oil. You're bringing, right? You're seeing those things coming together. Yeah.
Now, but think about where this goes from the small business standpoint. And this is why I still think it's never been a better time to MSP. It's like, well, I'm just starting my MSP. How in the world do I compete with, the people that acquired Iconic, right?
You can win. Yeah. I believe you can win right now.
Because if you could, what Iconic, the future, the existing Iconic to some extent, and all these roll-ups, if you look at what they're doing, they're cutting cost because that's what they do. And they're commoditizing what they have left, which means the relationship is still on the table for somebody to come in and get.
Yep.
And one of the things that we found in working with small, because again, we work with one-man shops all the way up to 1,000-people firms, right?
Yeah.
I think that's our largest is 1,000-person MSP. Maybe we have larger, but I have to say, all across the way, everybody uses the same stack. Right. I mean, you think that that the larger companies would have all these amazing tools available to them, and they don't. They have the same tools that the small MSP has available to them. If you look at Ford Motor Company, what are they using to manage their IT organization? That would be Microsoft. Right. That would be Intune, and all those tools are still available to the smallest MSP.
Yeah.
So again, all of that stuff is being commoditized. What's not being, it's why there's still so many, sole proprietor attorneys, small attorney firms, everything else, because it's the value of the relationship. Right.
Yeah. It's the trust. It drives. Let's use drived. I don't care if we use bad words here or like a fake language, but drove in, right? That you trust them. And sometimes there's that concierge need, or I provide better value. And I really believe that if I was still in a giant MSP, the challenge is that most of the people there are better. And what I mean by that is, think about your role today. If I start a company tomorrow, and y'all can make fun of me in the audience if you disagree, but if I start a company tomorrow, there's almost zero chance I have a server. There's almost zero chance unless I'm in some very deep vertical that requires that I have infrastructure. I am most likely, even if I'm building code, I'm most likely using an identity centric aspect like Microsoft Azure AD or Entra or Okta or Ping or Jump Cloud or blah, 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 right? Traitware, whoever it is my IDP, identity provider. And then I'm consuming some SaaS applications. And if I'm doing code building, I'm probably doing function services like you're this way, Jeff, right? I'm using platform services, healthy CI/CD pipelines, things that make sense and are very scalable. And therefore, down the road, like I don't have a lot of the old infrastructure, but guess what? Every MSP out there, the 40 million, the $200 million, they have 80% to 95% of their client base still in an infrastructural world. And one of the things that I did at a conference I spoke at, I played a video of the orbital rover landing. And it was called the How Not to Land an Orbital Rover. And it's talking about SpaceX trying to land their rocket engines. And they just kept blowing up and blowing up and blowing up. And they got a little better and a little better and a little better. But my reason for playing that was to say it's the companies that fail the fastest, that innovate the quickest, that will win, period. Right? And that's at the SMB, that's at the macro enterprise company. It's those statements are true. But then I went on to say, imagine you're living in an infrastructure world where I need to call my MSP, tell them I want to add in this new ERP. They're going to spin up a server. They're going to make sure they have enough resources. They're going to buy more RAM. They're going to buy a license. They're going to schedule it with their project services team. They're going to get the core built. They're then going to get with the company to install the software. And then at the end of 3.5 weeks, you realize this is a piece of shit and I don't want it. Right? Versus I'm going to go click a SaaS app, turn it on and go, nah, that's not great, bro. I'm done. And it's user driven and it can be done securely if you do it right. And you can do things in a way that are very scalable, very quick, very commoditizable. And so when you think about that shift, their competitors, and by them, I don't mean the MSP, I mean the MSP's client, their competitors that start today that don't have those infrastructural anchors will win. And what will happen is either they will convert or they will, imagine being an MSP in that world. That means your client base is the losers. And that means they'll either have to be the winners by converting and growing into that space, or their competitors will drive a better user experience, will drive a better digital experience, will drive a more secure experience, and will do it for cheaper and faster than you can do it. And this comes up no better than when I was in my CSA group, and we're talking about 170 pages of guidance for companies to go through brownfield to greenfield or brownfield conversion of old non-ZT structured stuff. And it was 170 pages of guidance, getting stakeholders involved, getting workflows, versus I made one ask. I said, guys and gals, these smart doctors in the room, I said, company, an enterprise born in the cloud, using modern things like Azure AD, Intune, extensibilities in that way. How much of this stuff still applies? You know what we came to, Jeff, after 2 weeks of arguing over it? None of it applies. Zero, because I can do these things in place with modern tooling that don't impact user experience. That whole statement I've just made, it means that if I was to start an MSP tomorrow and only focus on those Goldilocks clients, only focus on those people that just have AD because they have AD, just have a line of business application because they haven't moved to the cloud version or have, and they haven't gotten rid of their infrastructure, I could build them up and I could do automation of their entire, I could have them get an email when they join my company that says, hey, Jeff. I could even have it parse out Jeff out of your title and then use automation to make my voice say Jeff. Right? It's not hard for that one word to insert. Hey, Jeff, welcome to the team. Just want to let you know we're going to be making some changes to make your world better, more positive, and also more secure. The next step, your MFA. There's going to be a little button that you're going to get in this email. Go ahead and click it for me, and let's get your phone enrolled. I'll let you know what your next steps are. Welcome to the team. Have a great day. And then when Jeff does that, it then knows on the API side that Jeff has changed and added his phone. It moves him into the right conditional access group, and Jeff doesn't know a fucking difference. But yet I've moved him through that experience and I didn't have to have a human. And if it fails, I get a failure note. And so I'm just kind of putting forward that not only are we going to orchestrate the tech clicks, we're going to orchestrate the experience. We're going to orchestrate the entire world of how we take them into an onboarding. And as that's the IP. That's the things that MSPs are growing is how do I deal with the onboarding and growth? Done that. As you take that forward, it also means I can't build those same systems for someone that's not that way. I can't deal with all the delineations inside of that organization this is on an infrastructure, a different line of business software, different ways they approach. I can't do the same level of automations. So I'd just hear your thoughts on that I know a world that if you're not also in that scenario where you can automate and you can do those things in the right way, you will also find yourself on the bottom end of that conversation.
Well, the word I would take from all that is identity, because I think that's another issue that doesn't get doesn't get enough discussion.
You're playing my
So,
guitar right now, Jeff.
so if you think about, again, Gartner calls it a composable structure, which is basically we compose our business from all these different parts, right?
Sure.
And when you compose them all together, the problem is the identities get scattered across all those different systems. And you need a SAML, you need you need zero trust, but the only way to get that is to integrate them together. And this is where an MSP becomes essential, and where that knowledge becomes essential, is gluing the systems together and
Amen.
helping that small business have the best advantage of all the best tools that are right for them.
Yep.
And then be able to glue them together in a SAML-friendly, identity-friendly way that,
or OIDC, if I can, would be my
issue.
preference. But yeah, it's okay. No,
Well,
not
yeah.
SAML hating, not SAML hating. Just love me.
Well,
some
I mean,
OIDC.
there's a lot
I
of
know,
different ways to do it, but the idea is that, again, there are proven ways, easy ways. Again, we spend a lot of time here making sure that we can glue our systems together.
I love it.
So that when we onboard or offboard somebody, it's as painless and as secure as possible, right?
And predictable and reliable.
Zero defects.
And zero defects and all of those things. So anybody watching today, I think the takeaway has to be something that came up yesterday. A guy posted something that kind of hit me wrong and hit a few of my friends wrong. Focused on educating the SMB. Nope. I don't want my thermonuclear engineer to educate me about the nuclear power plant. I don't care. I want them to make my experience good. I want to educate the SMB on how they can be better with their tools. I want to educate them on how they can be better at serving their customer. I do not need to educate them about their security and the things. We've only done that as a FUD method and as a way to overcome the gaps of what we need to accomplish. But we're out of time, Jeff. This went by so quick.
I know, because there's so much more to talk about.
Oh, we could talk for hours on it. But
so
I want to leave with that thought. And Mark Matthews nailed it, right? Can't build systems for someone who's not that way. And what it comes down to is you're either thousands of variables or do I serve 20 variables? And when you make that choice, it'll predict your outcome. And I think that's the point that I wanted to make. But Jeff, fantastic topic. If you haven't thought about your MSP from the outside in, it's the same premise of think about your customer experience. And most importantly, your customer's customer experience. And that is when you will win the day for that SMB. Thanks, Jeff.
And the budget gets huge. Yeah,
it does get huge. Don't miss out on the monies. We does love the monies.
That's right. Hey,
thanks, man.
Thanks for having me.